This is INCRadio, DZEM 954, the voice of truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ or Iglesia ni Cristo.
Don't underestimate
the power
of a single
conversation.
It could change your whole life.
INCRadio Chatline.
conversations that matter.
Hello, everyone. Another episode of INC Radio Chat Line where we have conversations that matter. And the conversation today is something that we all spend, we all maybe have, hopefully, talking about money and the conversations that we might not be having about money. And I'm Tony. If this is your first time joining our show, and I have some of my friends here in the hangout with me that are going to be hopefully talking and being vulnerable a little bit about this topic. I don't know if they're as comfortable talking about money as I am. Sometimes I'm not comfortable talking about it. I don't know about you guys. You guys comfortable talking about money?
Depends who I'm talking to, I guess.
Is it
Or
like age where you could just say it's just a number?
I wish.
I mean, it's just a number until you need to buy something.
Yeah.
Then that number matters.
It's a low number.
Low number. Arnie,
When I'm poor, it's easy to talk about money. When I had money, it was harder to talk about money. So like I said, it all depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah, you don't want to
And the
talk too
comment.
loudly if you have a lot of money.
Okay.
And the context too, right? The context too, like why are you talking to me about my money?
Asking you how much you make, is that
Yeah.
I get that question like never, but I know other people get that sometimes. I know that's like a sensitive question to ask. I don't know if you guys has anyone ever asked you that, like, oh, how much do you make?
Uh,
Here it is.
yeah, I've had that, and I would say that's one of the uncomfortable conversations about money. Is like asking how much I make, and I like I try to figure out, do I answer them how much I make on like on payday, or do I just mention how much I make in an hour? Because it might not sound as impressive if I answer them how much I make per hour versus if I just tell them how much I make in a month or something.
Is it
Like,
even a good question to ask? Do you guys ever think that maybe you don't need to
no,
ask that
I
question?
don't think so.
I
No, like
I think it depends on the reasoning. For example, like when I decide I want to do something else as career wise, I may talk to the person and say, you don't have to tell me exactly how much you make, but possibly like what does it start at or what is the range? Stuff like
Mm.
that. But just to
mm,
ask, hey Nate, how much money do you make? I think that would be uncomfortable.
It does depend on the audience though, because like I know with my dad, like me and him are kind of straightforward with numbers, and I remember kind of telling him like, oh, okay, I make this much now, as I was developing in my own career, and I know at work, like we brought it up because we want to know like how different are they paying us, like are they not
Mm.
paying some of us, so there's that. But I've also done like career fairs where there's like children and they just flat out ask you like how much do you
Oh, that
make,
makes sense. Yeah.
mhm,
and
Educational purposes versus just curiosity,
just
right?
because.
right. And for me it's like it is kind of just a number. I don't really put a whole lot of weight into it, but I know that it's very sensitive for some people, so I just avoid it
Mhm.
just because
Mhm.
knowing for the most part it's sensitive to others to talk about it.
I am with you there, Nick, where like I don't go into like the specific of like how much. It's just that for me, I don't really care like the specific amount. I just know the range of like what I have at the moment. So like if someone asks me, I can mention that, but yeah, again, it depends on like why they're asking me. If they're asking me to compare, then yeah, it's uncomfortable for me. Well, to compare in the way of like uh saying, like saying, "Oh, I make this much. How much do you make?" Kind of in that context. But if it's just, "Oh, like we're both working the same job, are we getting paid kind of like the same?" Like that kind of comparison, I'm okay with that. It's just if it's like that comparison in the way of like, like it feels like almost like they just want to have something to brag about to you.
Or like a conversational like kind of point, right? I feel like if there's
Mhm.
anything close to that I've experienced is typically with someone who's like older than me, and maybe they're just trying to make conversation with me, like, oh, like, how's your job, how's it doing, oh, how much do you make? Like sometimes it just like
Mm.
casually goes out. That's just like one of the things that I've thought about in terms of, because I have other friends who they've expressed to me that it makes them like uncomfortable when people do that, especially just depending on the field that you're in. Like some fields I feel like are known for making like good money. And so it's kind of, I don't know, when you make good money, sometimes you're shy to talk about that, right? I think Nate, you kind of touched on that earlier. Like sometimes if you have a lot, you're like, "Ah, I don't know if I want to be putting that out there." But I guess it just depends on, again, the audience, friends versus
Right.
strangers.
Like
Or
you might be worried they might hit you up for cash or for favors. It's like I
yeah.
got bills too, you know. I got bills to pay too. I got mouths to feed and all that. So it's probably more along the lines of like, what is your net worth, because people often think they have money or they have no money, but you can also have negative money. So
Hmm.
there's that side to it too. So you could be making a lot, but you could be in a ton of debt and you actually have negative assets, I guess you could
Yeah.
say, and you're actually poorer than somebody who has no money. Or like if you had like student loan debt, sure, you
Hmm.
may be making a lot of money, but you're also paying a lot of interest on that. So
True.
yeah, that's why it's not just a number, even though we joked about it earlier.
Yeah. Not just a number. So there's like different things that can kind of, what would make you feel more encouraged to talk about money versus not? Like is it what beyond just the person that it is? Like what would someone be able to do to make you more comfortable about talking about money in general?
Like for me, when my nephews ask me how much money I make, a lot of it comes from like what they want to do with their life, right? And so, their whole thing is like, yeah, I don't want to go to college, and I'm saying, yeah, you kind of need to, and they're like, why? And so prior to where I was working now, I actually made pretty good money, and I said, look, see, I went to college, it's just me by myself, and I'm making more money than your mom and dad combined, because they didn't go to college, kind of a thing. So in that content, then that's when I would be comfortable talking to them about stuff like that. But then, like I said, I think I was more comfortable talking about money when I was poor than when I actually had money.
Yeah, same for me. It's because I work in data, and if you're really good at math, I know that like growing up, for especially if you're in a Filipino household, you're like going to nursing or going to engineering. But I knew engineers who couldn't find a job in engineering, but they could get a job in data. And data, pays pretty well starting out, but it also climbs pretty significantly the more you learn about it. And so I've had conversations with younger adults who didn't know what they wanted to do, and they had no idea that data could be a viable, career path, and that, the work isn't too intense, compared to nursing is very intense, the study is very intense, and the work
Hmm.
is very intense, and the hours are too. But with like data, you're in the IT field, and when you kind of earn that level of proficiency working with like computers, it's not hard at all. It's I mean, I used to be a teacher, and the stress from being a teacher to working in IT was like a significant drop. So that's where I see it's kind of appropriate. But I don't give specific numbers. I just give like ballpark figures. Like, okay, when you start out, you'd be making around this much, and then as your resume goes up and up, you can expect, jumps in your pay up like this, and within 10 years, you should be making like this amount. And so that's where I think like generalizations kind of help. You don't have to be specific. You don't have to point to yourself, because there's others in your career field. You could just refer to that, and they can kind of guess like, you know, where you are at in that pay tier.
Yeah, it depends. Like just thinking about that in the environment that you're in, right? I because I was thinking about this recently because I had a friend who was going through that where you you have an idea where you should be at, but then you're not quite there yet, and that idea also of bringing up to your potential your boss like the potential for raises, right? That's also another awkward kind of conversation to have at times. Have either of you ever? I haven't been at that point yet. I've been fortunate to be, you know, been okay in terms of advocating, but Arnie or Nate or EJ asking for raise, is that an awkward conversation to have? Or even on the receiving end, have you had to be the one like talk to you about getting a raise from someone you were supervising?
For me, it was not a difficult thing because if I know I work hard and I know that I do a lot of stuff that a lot of people can't do,
Mhm.
I can justify asking for a raise because then I could always say, well, if I'm not going to get a raise, I could go elsewhere where they'll probably pay me more. And if you have value, then of course, you'll get it. But and I think if like I said, if you're hardworking and you know your value, I don't think it's going to be a difficult conversation. I think it's a hard conversation when you just want to raise, but yet you really don't deserve it.
But what if you know your value, but you don't know how to present that? Like, what if you're just one of those? Because I feel like you're very confident in like your bones, Arnie. But I might not be the same as you, as so forward in being able to like maybe you're someone's second guess like am I worth, or how did you go about it? Would Did you have things to prove like this is
I
what I've
did.
done, this is why I deserve?
So, yeah. So I wrote down like my different accomplishments or the different projects that I worked on that no one else could do. And then when you show them these different things that you've done, all the different, like I said, your accomplishments, everything that you've helped, whether it's a company or help the team, the growth and all that. And I think when you have those facts, then it's easier to ask. Now, if you're just coming in saying, hey, I think I deserve a raise because I've worked hard, but you have nothing to back you up, then I think that makes it harder. But I think if you have some type of support, you know, something to back you up, I think it makes it easier.
See, and I have a
And
whole different thing with like imposter syndrome at work. You
Oh
know,
no.
that's a thing. So I'm always afraid to like bring up that conversation with like my manager or HR because they might be like, "Well, let's see. Do you really belong at this job?" Like I have that fear in my mind.
Yeah.
actually, like an advice someone gave me before, like in terms of like asking for like a raise, like they said one another thing you can add to like what Arnie like mentioned is like like letting them know that I want to like I want this job to also be to be part of my future. I want to grow with this company, with this job, so letting kind of like putting it in a way of like like to invest in you, like asking
Mm.
them to invest in you because there's like with your track record of like you're doing a good job, right? Like it like asking them to invest in you, like to be like like if you if you give me this raise, I'll be able to stay in this job, while staying afloat with my bills and everything and my future plans. Like they say that what they told me is like if you're gonna ask for a raise, like that's one of the things I mentioned, like let them know like your achievements in your job, but also let them know that you want to grow with this company.
It may
Mm.
also help like to apply for a job outside the company and get a new
Mm-hmm.
number and then bring that to your company as a form of nonverbal communication using numbers.
Mm-hmm.
You can say,
Nonverbal.
"Hey, I brought this number in. Can you give me something a little bit more to retain me?" Because it does cost the company money to have that position down for several months
Mhm.
as they
Mm-hmm.
train up the next person, and plus you take the knowledge with you. So there's negotiation tactics if you don't want to just bring it up cold, because you will absolutely have more leverage if you had another number in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And if they kind of scoff you, you could be like, "Well, I could just get this new job."
I would say though, Tony, in terms of like what encourages me to talk about money, it's like if when they're not focused on numbers, but when they're asking me about like my plans, right? They're like, oh, like, are you thinking about buying a car? Are you thinking about buying a house? In the future, because maybe they just want to give me advice on that. Like if
Mm.
that's what it is, if that's why they're bringing up how much I make, you know, then yeah, I'm open to that because I'm always like I always want to hear like the experience, right? Like what to avoid, like if let's say I'm saving up to buy to buy a car or like an apartment, a house, like I'm always open ears to whatever like to whatever it is that I have to know first before diving into that. But yeah, that's something that will encourage me, to in terms of like talking about money or how much I make.
I got a funny story that kind of goes along with what you said earlier. So like
Mhm.
every year, most companies they do like a performance review and they also do goal setting. And I remember one
Mhm.
year I was like, I have no idea what my goals are with this company. Like I don't know what to do. So I just made something up. I said, I think eventually I want to get into management just so I can have something and turn it in. And they made me an assistant manager. Be careful what you put down. So yeah, just a funny little side note.
Hmm. Okay. So tips on how
Mhm.
to potentially get promoted. You just gotta talk
Like,
to
oh, they saw Nate's answer. They were like, oh, he's
like,
ambitious.
all right,
We always need people
let's
like
put
that.
that to work.
We need people like that. Let's put him to. Let's see. Let's see him
What
try it.
initiative? This
What
guy's going
initiative?
places.
That's interesting though, because it's making me think of different aspects of just where money can come up, right? That we're speaking more on the professional kind of spectrum. Do you think it's also awkward in your social circles, like with your friends, like colleagues, potentially, like after work, if you're the type to hang out with your colleagues after work? Does that ever get awkward having conversations about money with friends? Is there ever a point where it does? Like maybe
I,
conflicts in terms
I
of.
don't think so.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah, when they're trying to decide whether you're going to go to fine dining or go to a fast food place, I think
Mm.
that is a lot of it because, some people, even if they want to eat at, a five-star restaurant, if they can't afford it, then it gets kind of awkward where, I kind of want to hang out with you, but I can't because I can't
Mm.
afford where you're
Mm.
going.
I mean, are you talking about like friends or coworkers?
It could be both. We're talking about social, like just the because
Mm.
eventually even dating, right? I feel like that is also a whole other thing. But before we get to that, just like with friends and
Uh, uh,
colleagues, people that you just see
mm.
casually,
I
is
would
that
say with like, oh yeah, yeah. I would say with coworkers, like yeah, that could happen where, you kind of have differences and like, or you don't know everyone's differences. But with my friends, at least with my friend, we kind of have an idea already of like each other's like how each other's doing like financially, and we're all kind of in the same sort of like in the same range. So we know what our lane is in terms of like where we could eat, where we could eat. Or see, this is the kind of funny rule. Like if someone suggests to going like somewhere like a bit more fancy, they have to treat everyone. That was their idea. That
whoever's
was their
idea it
idea.
is, they
Yeah.
gotta they have to pay.
Like if you know we don't have the money for this and you still want us to go there, okay, you treat everyone.
See, that was more concerned when I was like in college and I had like absolutely no money. And I would have friends that were already working and they always wanted to eat somewhere nice. And I'm like, I can only eat off the appetizer menu. Can't
Aw.
afford anything. And I've had cases where friends were like, hey, let's go out to eat. Where do you want to go? And I'm like, let's go to Subway. I could buy $5 sandwich. And they would laugh at me. And I'm like, no, that wasn't a joke. That's all I can afford.
Oh, wow.
I only work at a car wash right now. I don't have any money. And I felt kind of bad because they did buy me, you know, food that time. So there was that awkwardness. But yeah, I feel like more so when you're younger, that's a thing where the differences in pay and what you have as far as like free spending cash,
Right.
you can have much more of an impact. Because nowadays, when you're an adult, most people can afford meals up to a reasonable amount. Okay, I'm not talking about 5-star dining where they take out 7 tiny courses. You know, um, so on the flip side, that's where you're considerate too of others. Like you don't just assume that they can afford like $120 steak if you just randomly want to go out. It's like, no, if you wanted to just spur of the moment, hang out with friends, pick something that's going to be reasonable.
Hmm. Well, not just eating out too, right? Even, going to possibly concerts or, those different activities, like maybe you all want to go, I don't know, or the skiing or something. And some of that stuff can get kind of costly. Like how do you guys navigate those situations, especially if you're not at that point? I mean, even as a young adult, I feel like sometimes it's you might not be fully there yet to afford some of those things, but your friend group, different ages, different, lifestyles. How do you guys go about it?
That's the key. You've got to have different, you have to have different friends or different people that you hang out with.
Mm.
If you could, if you could afford the whole skiing and all that, then those are the friends that you're going to do that with. If you have one of those friends who just can only afford to go to the local park, then those are the friends. And I think it's knowing the different type of friends you have so that you don't overexert yourself, because sometimes if people, they don't want them to know that they can't afford it, they're just going to hang out with those friends anyways and then go broke just trying to hang out with those people because they really can't afford the
Trying to
activities
keep up,
or the places they're going.
trying to keep up. That
Yep.
can be tough. Even with the clothes, right? Sometimes like when you see your friends have the pressure, you ever get that influence of the stuff that your friends have,
Yeah.
like, oh, they have that thing, like, should I have that thing too? In terms of
Or you look at their outfit and
pressure
you're like,
buying.
oh, I can, or yeah, you find kind of like kind of like a generalization of this. Oh, that I guess that's what's no, that's what's in, that's what's popular
Mhm.
now. So I gotta have something like that too if I want to fit in with this and with this group, because it does kind of feel awkward when you're just kind of where you're the only one that has like a different kind of like a different style because the style you're wearing is the style you can afford.
When I
But
was
how would
when I
you?
was younger, like I kind of saw past that because I worked, I guess you could say, in media since I was like young, and you learn about, okay, when you do media, you're trying to convince people to do one thing or another, and that kind of like reframed how I saw the world. Because I mean, it was just TV production in high school, but you learn those concepts. And it's like, do I want to be a walking billboard? Like I'm paying more money to advertise for this company. Like this doesn't make any sense. Like you should be paying me to wear your clothes to advertise. So I took a pretty drastic, different viewpoint on how all of that works, at a pretty young age. And so like just plain clothes now. Like I make it a point not to have brands. I'm like, I'm not going to be a walking billboard for somebody.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think once you get older, because even I think for me, even when I was younger, I wasn't really into the whole pop culture fashion stuff. I don't think I ever dressed whatever was trending. Um, and I don't know if it's because one, I knew my parents couldn't afford it, and so why would I stress over that? And as I got older, and I take my nephews out, and they get to the point where they do want the name brands, and then one day, because my nephew, like, he really wanted everything name brand, that's what he was used to. And then one day we took him to a thrift store and he saw like how much stuff he could get compared to like name brands. And they still have name brands there, it's just secondhand. And ever since then, he'll say, Auntie, can you take me to this thrift store or that thrift store? He doesn't even like look about going to the malls anymore because it's just clothes. So I think it's as you get older, you start to realize that the brand really isn't expensive. And like Nate said, why are you going to advertise for them for free?
Yeah, and in the comment, there's actually Chris Martin mentioned keeping up with the Joneses
Yeah.
attitude. If you're not familiar with that saying, it's like you see somebody like your neighbor, and they have this like a shiny new car, and you feel like you have to also keep up with them.
Hmm.
I know some people feel that way, and like it's been brought up to me, like, do I want to give off a certain appearance in the vehicle that I drive or what I wear? For me, it's like, no. If someone's going to judge me based on certain things, then I really don't need friends like that. And my friendships kind of self-sort themselves to where like my friends are going to be judgy of me and what I wear and vice versa.
I'm gonna continue. I don't want to say pick on you, but maybe pick your brain a little bit, Nate, because out of the four of us here, you are the one that's married. So in terms of when you were prior to being married, when you're just in a relationship with Melanie, I know she's there in the live chat. How did you navigate that with conversations about money and wealth? Because I feel like with friends, it's you can get around a little bit more in terms of what you can get away with, I guess, in that sense, versus a potential significant other, and you gotta have to be real about finances in terms of planning for your future, right? So
Right.
how do you handle those conversations?
Well, for one, we're kind of opposites when it comes to that.
Okay.
I mean, you could just look at our vehicles and you could tell we have different mindsets on that. And sometimes she'll try to pull me into her direction, and then I try to pull her into my direction as far as like, what we have. But at the same time, it's like I don't, if someone wants nice things, I'm not gonna judge them for that either. Like
Hmm.
it's just not a thing. For me, it's like if they want something like that, they have their reasons, and by all means, go ahead and go for it. What was your question again? I went off on a tangent. I lost my train of thought.
No, just navigating because the points that you and Arnie both brought up in terms of like with your friends, like with your friend, it's a lot easier to kind of get away with, not having the conversation. You could just find different friends that like different things than you do, or
Yeah.
just there's a lot of implied things. I feel like with friendships because you're close enough that you know each other.
Right.
You kind of guess, oh, maybe so and so is not able to, and you don't have to. You could probably get away with not having the conversation. But I feel like with having a
Relationships.
significant other with a
Right.
relationship, you have to be a little bit more
I think it
honest.
depends on the dynamic of your relationship.
Mm,
Are you really going to let things like that get in the way of your relationship with that person? For some, it may be they may not want you wearing non-name brand clothes at all. And that's not my relationship. I'm not going to be involved in that. I'm not going to judge that. But like for us, it's my wife likes nicer things, and I'm because we kind of grew up in different backgrounds, but we do have a lot of common ground and common interests
yeah.
that brought us together. But it's like any relationship, you have give and take. You have to compromise on certain things, and it should work both ways. So every now and then I need to eat at a nice restaurant, or I need to have somewhat nice clothes. And every now and then she needs to also not prioritize certain things that may be a little more I don't want to use the word vain. I don't want to sound bad. But yeah, I mean, if you want a successful relationship, yeah, you got to have the give and take, the common ground. And you don't have to, not all relationships have to have it where you're both going to agree on everything 100%.
Mm, it's a work in progress kind of thing,
Right. We
I
do
guess.
have very similar values for very important things when it comes to raising a family, but everything else we let ourselves be our own selves basically.
Mm, okay. So for those planning to get into a relationship, advice with
Yeah.
Nathan Russell.
Because I noticed you stopped going on camping trips.
Renz put a comment on here and he says, me and my wife, we enjoy the boyfriend and girlfriend stage just by eating gifts from time to time. She doesn't want flashy things, but I do for her. Yeah, right. I think he wants it for him, not her.
Different expectations. Yeah.
See, and that's true though, because when I was in relationships, I was the one that would buy things for the other person, and I didn't really want anything in return. And I think that got me into a lot of trouble because when they saw how much money I make and then I could actually buy them name brand things, I think they started like taking advantage because they were like, ooh, I wish I had this, or I wish I had that, because they knew how much money I had. That's why now I'm happy that I'm broke, because, then I don't have to worry about doing things for anybody, or there's no expectation. When you're broke, they're not expecting anything from you, right? As opposed to when you have a lot of money, then like that, when you do go out, they expect, are you paying for me today?
I'm so glad that you brought that up, Arnie, because I feel like I don't know personally any, wealthy people, but what I've seen before in a lot of interviews is some of the things that people talk about is like they start to second guess. They don't like talking about how much they make because they start to second guess how genuinely people are showing up for them versus because of their wealth or because of their money. And it kind of makes you think like how money can kind of, I guess, depict present us to other people, like how much are people really assessing us for us versus how much money we make or how much money we have. And I feel that kind of goes back to that whole idea of why is it uncomfortable to talk about money, because do
I
we use it as a measuring are we using it as a measuring stick?
on
I know
that
some
thought,
people do, where they only want to be friends with the rich people or someone that they can get something from, as opposed to looking at their personalities and stuff like that.
on that actually, I would say it's less about how much you make, but how much you're willing to give. You know,
Mm.
Yeah, and I don't want to
because
disparage anyone who works hard and has earned it. You know, for some people, that's what they want. They do want to make money, and however they use it, good or bad, it's kind of on them. I think it's pretty universal though that like the real problem is like, do you have a love for money, and do you kind of let your own ambitions kind of overrule relationships with others? Are you willing to cut down other people in order to make money? I think that's a more proper dividing line as far as like the ethics of like money and talking about it.
Hmm.
mhm. I would say, because this happened to me before, because I had this mindset before of like, if I have the money to make to make my friends, my family, like to make those people happy, I would use that money if I have it. If I have it, I'd use it. I don't like I didn't even care how much I would have left, after that. But what I realized is that at some point it became kind of just like it wasn't that they were, I wouldn't say they weren't thankful, but they started expecting it,
Hmm.
from me, that like when we go out, then I'm the one paying, like it kind of became an expectation rather than just something, that they'll let me do because I want it. It's just because, oh, like, yeah, of course he's gonna pay. you know
Goes back to what Nate said earlier, right? Consideration.
Mhm.
um, Consideration being you're thoughtful of whoever it is, whether you're even close to them or not. Just being
Yeah.
considerate of that question that you're about to ask, or that topic that you're about to bring up, or even just the way that you're treating them, being conscientious of that. I feel like there are things. It's kind of hard to tackle every single kind of conversation that you would have with another person regarding money, but I feel like those are kind of good rules to live by, right? Like considering the other person, considering how you would feel, how it would make you feel if you were being asked that question or brought that topic up with. Yeah.
And I think it just depends, because like for me, I've had a job where I really made really good money, and I was close to six figures. I was so mad I missed it by $4,000, right? And this was back in 2010, right? When that was a lot back then, compared to what I'm making now, where you're like barely getting by. And so I think being able to experience both sides, it makes me more aware of how I do talk to people about it when it comes to money. and whether or not that is something that is, like comfortable to bring up. Like I said, whenever we have family stuff, I'm like, hey, I tell my sisters, you guys all got dual incomes, right? Because we're all married. I go, I got single income and I'm not making money, so you guys got a treat, right? And things like that. But when you get to live both sides of being like, I was at a point where I would go shopping and I wouldn't even have to look at the price tag because I didn't have to. But then now, because it's different, where now I have to be more cautious and I have to be more aware of what I'm spending. And so sometimes when you have those different conversations, depending on who you're having it with, because you know what it's like, I think it just makes you more aware. And so you try not to have those, or you try to have those conversations where it's not awkward for the other person, you know?
Hmm. Not putting people in a position where it's like you're putting them on the spot, or it's something that could go south like very quickly. Because I feel like it's something that can also cause conflict. I've noticed, with talking about money. It could be in any situation, with different things. So I like that both you and Nate and Arnie talking about kind of looking at both sides, whether you're the receiver or you're the one, talking about it with someone else. Is
Well,
there any? Sorry,
what's
go ahead.
interesting about like also how you make money, I feel like there's a dividing line between those who earn their money because they have a college degree and then those who earn their money because they went into a trade. Because I have
Mm,
friends who went into trades and they make really good money, like more than a lot of the people that I know who are college educated and think they make good money. Like I know one of my friends, he's a mechanic and he does it for, I think, for like a fire trucks or something like that, some big large vehicle, and he makes a lot of money. Like you'd be surprised when he mentions how much he makes, and he was not shy about bringing it up because he's proud of it, right? Because he came from mechanic background. But you do know that like people might look down on him for that because he does a dirty job versus someone who has like a college degree. So there's also that. Just because you make a certain amount of money, some people might not think you're still worthy of like respect or prestige or anything like that because of the job
mhm,
you have. And I think that kind of I mean that's led to like problems in this country because there's a lot of those dirty jobs that can't be filled, and so now they pay a lot because they need to be done no matter
mhm.
what. And sometimes kids don't want to go into that because number one, they're never advertised because no one wants to talk about it, but then number two, there's no prestige in it. So there's it's kind of like this interesting situation we have nowadays because about 20 years ago they started making it a requirement. You had to have a college degree,
Right.
to get a job. So it's kind of split off society to those who did and didn't go to college.
So do you think you brought up an interesting point because it makes me think of, when you see people in like these higher positions, is it like a power thing? Is it like being able to say that it's not necessarily the amount you're making, but because of what position it brings you to, and that's how other people are perceiving you? Is that the thing that shifts?
I mean, I know that's how some people are going to perceive others. I see it the opposite. Like if you can describe your what your job is in one word, like that's a meaningful job, right? Mechanic, nurse,
Hmm.
right? Something that's easily described versus like compliance data analyst, which is what I am. It's like I know I know my if my job disappeared, the world keeps moving, right? But like if mechanics, weren't around, then you wouldn't be able to drive to work. So I kind of see things in the opposite way because like the way I see it, some of these dirtier jobs that don't have the same prestige are actually more important,
Hmm.
for society to function. And then you have those who have, and I don't want to sound like I'm disparaging anybody's job either.
Yeah.
It's just, this is how people, would view each other in the world. And it's like, is that really necessary? Is that really productive?
The reason why I kind of bring that up is because I saw Christopher's comment in the chat. He said owning the nice car or nice home can be an illusion, especially if you're struggling to make payments.
Right.
it goes back to that idea of keeping up with the Joneses, right? Like it's one thing to be wealthy and to have, an abundance of these blessings, but it's very different with the attitude that you're kind of carrying with yourself, or the mindset that you have once you're in that position.
And
And
there's
then
a content creator, I think on TikTok or YouTube, where he brings in people to interview and they talk about all these nice things that they bought. And he's ridiculing them because it's like, you put yourself in this kind of debt. Like, what are you
Mhm.
thinking? Like, why did you buy this? This is the amount of money that you make. Yeah, it's nice, but look at like your car payments and your house payments that you're making, and you're clearly underwater.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of created a new situation, especially in our society, because credit has been very abundant. Back then, if you didn't have the money, you couldn't buy it, but now there's
Mhm.
credit's a lot more prevalent. Credit is cheap, so now we end up with a whole bunch of people who buy a lot of things and can show off, but really don't have anything to show for it.
Just a lot of puffed up stuff. It's like flashes and lights, but then behind the scenes, you're kind of like, oh, well,
Right.
was it
Yeah,
worth
because I've seen people who were really well off and they're very humble. Like the house and the cars that they drive, it's not the flashy type, it's just your regular sedan.
it? Hmm.
They don't go all spending their money. And that's one thing that my nephews asked me. They're like, look at that person, they're really rich, why are they driving that car? I go, that's why they're rich, because they're driving that car. Because if they were driving something more expensive, then they'd be wasting all their money paying for the things that they really don't need, when a car's got four wheels that gets you places, right?
Hmm.
So
That reminds me of like, because I live next to the university and the houses get really expensive there. And I often joke, it's like the people who have real money are the ones that drive around in old Toyota Land Cruisers. Not to promote, the Toyota Land Cruiser, but if you look it up, back then, it's like almost $100,000 like SUV, but it is very plain looking. Okay, if you ever look it up, it looks, there's nothing flashy about it. There's way flashier SUVs. Most people probably never even heard of this vehicle, but I'm like, that's the true sign of wealth when you see somebody just casually driving around in that vehicle. So it kind of goes back to what you said. Like, they don't want to be showy, but they do buy very quality things.
Hmm. The reason why I bring it up is because it speaks to intent for me. Like your intent in everything. And this is a question that I've kind of been sitting on like throughout the day today, just thinking about this topic. Because when when you think about um like that first time you get your paycheck, right? Like your first time you're working, you have this sense of like, oh, I can do more things now, right? Like I can do more things. And that idea, I feel like, of um being able to buy this, being able to buy that, it gives you like this good feeling. But then sometimes when that becomes too much, it's almost as if like, it becomes a constant cycle. The more that you have of it, the more that you start to feel like, oh, I can do more, I can do more, I can do more. So my question really is that, do you th- did you notice at all, and could be, it doesn't have to be anyone specific, that money makes people feel like they're in control of things? Like it gives them, I see you nodding, EJ.
Yeah, I feel like I've definitely had that experience. Like where, like with my first paycheck, it's just like, oh, like I feel like this just opened a lot of doors for me. Like, and it like, and my mom told me this, like it told me that I would feel this. She told me that I'd feel more confident, like having that money, and I think I did. I feel like I had control. Like, not to sound dramatic, but I felt like I had control of my over my life now. Like, oh, I have, like, have this money. Like like if even if my parents, even if their savings are gone, I still have this money. I can still help them. Like, it made me feel like I was in control now because like I have my own money. If there's an emergency, there's anything that needs to be paid. I'm like, oh, I can do something like that. If I'm like if I'm up somewhere, I don't have a ride, because this was before I could drive, before I learned how to drive. Like if I'm off somewhere, I don't have like I don't have a ride, I can just get an Uber, like I have money to pay for it. Like, so yeah, I had that experience of like having money made me feel like I had control, you know. And that was kind of like again, that was mostly because of like that first taste of like that first paycheck, when you see it on your bank account, like, oh, like this is more that this is more money than I've ever seen, or I've ever not ever seen, I've ever possessed. This is more money than I've ever possessed in my life. So it made me feel like funnily enough, it made me feel like I could buy anything, but in reality, probably not. I
Yeah,
definitely couldn't have bought.
from the one paycheck.
Yeah, I couldn't have even like uh, bought an apartment, or rented an apartment with it.
Well, the reason why I asked that question is not to take it as like a black and white, like, oh, that's a bad thing, or oh, that's a good thing, but just to kind of show that, you know the way that we kind of handle ourselves with it, because it's one thing to have the money, right, to have the wealth, and that could be good, because if you have your needs fulfilled, great, right? Like that's always a good feeling, is if you have your needs fulfilled, you're able to pay your bills and take care of all your stuff, like that's always great to have. But then, how your mindset is once you're in that position, your character, the way that, like, stuff that Arnie was speaking to earlier, what is the way that you're presenting yourself, to the world, and are you letting it control you, like once you're at that thing? Because I feel like the the tendency, if we're not careful, could lead to, I think it was Nate that mentioned earlier, that idea of greed, right? When it becomes too much, when it becomes excessive.
I noticed that in myself too, because before I started earning, like before I started working, before I started earning like money, I thought of like all these things that I can do to help. Like I could use this to help, help this person, help my parents, help my friends, But when I actually had the money, and this is, like I might have asked myself before, why was I not born rich? And I found my answer. I found my answer because when I realized the more money I saw on my bank account, the harder it was to let go of that money. The harder it was for me to open my wallet to buy things, because I realized I like seeing that number go up, go up and accumulate more and more. Like it became harder and harder for me to spend it the more that there was in my account. And like that became kind of, it showed me that this is probably why I wasn't born rich. I wasn't born rich because, like, for me, seeing that number go up, like, I wanted to keep seeing it go up. Where to the point of like, I would sacrifice things just to not spend money, on things. And yeah, that's something that I noticed, like in myself. Yeah.
Arnie, Nate, thoughts?
I was gonna say that it's one thing. Like it's true. If you have more money, you'll be more in control. That's a fact. You'll be able to pay for your needs. You can buy whatever you want. You can invest, in whatever in your community, and you can make decisions because you're the one who's gonna bankroll everything. But the scary thing is when you're making money, but then you're not in control, and then you cannot properly budget how much you're making. And the prime example of that is professional athletes. You watch almost any documentary. They actually made documentaries just on that topic, on how professional athletes go bankrupt, how music stars go bankrupt. There's so many from the 90s that like bought lavish mansions, but those things have upkeep, so the bills rack up. So that's the real problem, is you kind of spend ahead of yourself, and then you are now out of control. I see Arnie laughing.
because
Yeah.
because when you said when you make money and you don't have control over it, I was gonna say, oh, like all my uncles where they make all the money, but they got to turn the check over to my aunts. So they
Different.
only get an allowance.
It's the saying, "Mo money, mo problems," right?
No, seriously, because when you work overtime, you're gonna get more money, right? And I would always remember my aunts, tell my uncles, you work overtime, it's double time and all that. And they're like, why am I gonna work overtime? I just end up giving you my check, so he doesn't get anything anyways. So I just thought that was funny.
It always goes somewhere. It ends up going somewhere else, right, Artie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how I am too now. I don't do overtime anymore because I just realized the more money I make, the more goes to taxes. So I'm like, yeah, no, thank you. Especially like when you're single, the tax is too high. So I'm like, no, I'm like slaving over here and working hard, and it's all just going to the government. So no, I'm just gonna work regular stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Last one. Any misconceptions about talking about money that you think that we might not have addressed already, or we might have addressed and you want to like circle back and make a point?
Yeah, that money can't buy happiness. Money can buy
Yes, it
happiness.
can.
You never, you ever see
Yes,
a
it
sad
can.
person on a jet ski?
Yeah.
That's the joke.
Mhm.
But that's it's this kind of being reductive about it. But yeah, if you work hard and you make money, yes, you can be happy for yourself. But there's always too much of anything can be a bad thing. So I think that's common misconception, trying to convince people like not to make money, or that if you're rich it's a bad thing. It's like, no, not on its face, it's not. It depends how you use it and how you are with it.
Arnie, BJ.
I agree,
Answer.
and I think it's more of when when you have something. um I know sometimes people like to compare, and so like I said, I try not to talk about money, but when people get on my nerves because they think they're better than us, then sometimes I will bring up money just to not, like to shut them down, and that way they can get off their high horse.
Mhm. For me, I would say, like, don't be afraid to spend money. Just don't, like, it's like this is what my mom told me. Don't be afraid to spend money, but like, don't spend the money you don't have. And if you have a credit card, and that's exactly what I'm saying, don't spend the money you don't have. you know, but don't be afraid to spend your money. Especially for necessities, right? Especially for necessities, especially for things that like. And um and advice again that my mom has given me in terms of money is that always, like, when like you're working and you're earning money, right? Always set aside like an amount that you're happy with. Like for me, I was with like my paycheck, I was saving like 200. With every paycheck I would take up 200 from that. So like that money, that 200, it's not part of my paycheck anymore. It's part of my savings now. And that's money that I will not touch under any circumstances until there's an emergency. Right. So, oh yeah, like that's like it's good to think to, even if like, I know you can do it with your banking app, but it's good to also put yourself in that mindset of like, this money that you've set aside, it's not part of the money that you can spend anymore. Because if you keep looking at it, like if you keep looking at it like, oh, this is how much money I have, but then I also have this $800 that I saved for 3 months because was, I was setting it aside from like my paychecks. Like, don't look at it as like, like, I have this money and I also have this money. Look at it as, I have this money, but I have this money for emergencies. It's not money that I can spend, right? But yeah, just a little bit of advice on spending, I guess.
I think that's one thing that because I used to be like that when I was younger, where I would put everything in my savings and not look at it. But then I
Mhm.
just realized, life is too short.
I mean,
and
not everything,
and
but yeah,
and
setting
and, and
as
you save it all in there, and then when you die, everyone else gets to have fun with your money.
Mhm. I mean, not everything. You don't just put everything, but yeah, just like little bits, but where like you have this kind of like savings, especially if you're still, like you say, you're still living with your parents. Like having that is important because, like, when you move out, let's say you move out for a career or for school or something, you have that money to get you started, right? Or maybe you want to start a business in the future. You have that capital, right? Without having to take like a massive loan from the bank or something. Mhm.
I think for me, in terms of misconceptions, is just the topic in general. Have conversations about it. It can be super helpful, especially if you're talking to the right people, people that can give you, good financial advice. If you have friends who are accountants, shout out to my friends who are there whenever I need advice on taxes and different stuff like that. Like, have conversations about it because you never know that advice that somebody could give you, and don't be afraid to also communicate boundaries when it comes to things, so you don't fall into the whole keeping up with the Joneses and trying to keep up with everyone just for the sake of doing so. So have those conversations about money, and we hope that everyone was able to benefit from our talk today, even those in the live chat. I'm with you. I hate that I have to upgrade my phone every so years. If I could keep my phone forever, I would. I would. I would. So be careful, everyone out there, when you're spending, when you're saving. Just think about who you want to be, however much you have in your bank. So thanks for tuning in to INC Radio Chatline, where we have conversations that matter. See you guys again, same time next week. Take care, everyone.
Let me always dwell in the temple of the Lord till I breathe my